I kind of came to Springfield by accident. I had retired from the Army in 1992, and I had always thought it would be nice to live in New England, and particularly in New Hampshire. So I came up here exploring and rented a place up in Waterville Valley and started looking around. And finally came to New London because I had heard my mother had a friend here. And I walked into the New London agency and said, "What do you got?" And they showed me a bunch of places, and I found the place that I am living now and have been here ever since. I graduated from Georgetown University at ROTC and was given the kind of assignment they give to people they expect to have around for 2 years. And so I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and was bored to tears, and said, I can get out of this by volunteering for Vietnam. And I did that, and eventually I went over there and spent about 21 months on an extended tour. After that, I came back to the States, went to Hawaii, then back to Vietnam, then back to Hawaii. Then for a while I was in Kansas going to the Commandant General Staff College. After that, they told me it was time for me to go to Europe, and so they sent me over to Europe, and I did 4 years there. Finished that tour as a lieutenant colonel, and they were looking to give me a job in NSA, and I said I would, rather do almost anything. I bet you've got places you can't get people to go. And they said, just what we wanted. And they said, how about Pakistan? And I said, sold. Right, and so I went to Pakistan. I got the job by a story I can tell you later. And I spent 2 years there at the embassy as the assistant army attaché. Had a very interesting time there, and decided to go to Nepal and be the defense attaché there because I didn't really want to go back to the States right then, and again, go into some desk job in the Pentagon. So went back to Germany and stayed there for 4 years. And when that time was up and I had made colonel, they sent me to another place that they thought maybe people didn't want to go, which was Israel. And I spent 3 years there and retired out of it after the first Gulf War. That was my career. Fort Knox, Kentucky was not a place for exciting and intelligence work, as you might imagine. And I was looking for something other than that, something that would be actually some kind of active service. And they at first told me, no, we're not taking second lieutenants to Vietnam. Well, this is 1965. And soon they couldn't get enough second lieutenants, as you can imagine. But they said, we can send you to language school and you can learn Vietnamese for 9 months, and then they'll want to have you over there. And so I went to language school in Washington, D.C., and then wound up with the 9th Infantry Division, which, to my surprise, at that time was stationed in Kansas. But that was just because the division was being put together and was not quite ready to go. So after about 5 months, the division deployed, and I went over with them. After that, I spent about 10 months with them, and I was offered a job in a psychological warfare unit because of my language skills, and so I went into that. And that lasted until that summer. That was 1968. I came back from my leave for extending the leave I got for extending my tour, about 2 days before the Tet Offensive began. And so that was a very exciting time. That was the first part of my Vietnam experience. It was beginning up north in the northern part of South Vietnam. And so my boss said, why don't you go over to 1st Field Force, which is our higher command, and sit in on the intelligence briefing and what's going on. So I drove over there. I took the easy way over there, which is sort of through the country and countryside, and got there and found out that things were going to hell in North Viet, and the northern part of South Vietnam. Drove on back and decided to stop at a certain compound where they had a pretty good mess hall. And I got there, had my dinner, and started to go out through the gate, and they said, no, there's stuff going on, you can't go back to your place. I later found out that yes, that highway, that nice quiet highway that I took back, there was a VC division hiding just off in the woods next to it, and I was driving in my Jeep down that road by myself. And of course, that's the best way it could have been, because they weren't going to shoot at me because they weren't ready to start their attack. So I was pretty lucky about that. The next morning I got up, and they had been throwing grenades at us inside the compound that I stayed at night. So I decided to go over to where my office was, and I drove down into the town of Bien Hoa itself, and turned the corner to go to my office, and there was a firefight going on across the road. The Americans were on the left-hand side in the compound, and the VC were on the right-hand side. And I thought, well, now what am I going to do? So after a little while, it calmed down for a little bit, and they signaled me to come in. I drove my Jeep in as fast as I could, zipped in there, got in there. 10 minutes later, a helicopter gunship came by and just blew the hell out of the other side of the road. I went to my advanced course for intelligence, at the Defense Intelligence Agency in Washington. And after that, I said, send me to Hawaii, and or send me back to Vietnam, I don't care. Anyhow, they sent me to Hawaii, much to my surprise, and I spent 2 years there, which was wonderful. Bought a boat, I did a lot of sailing, did intelligence analytic work for the U.S. Pacific Command. And after a while, the work became a little repetitive, and I saw that they were recruiting people to become district advisors back in Vietnam. And so I volunteered for that. And they were anxious to have me because I did speak Vietnamese, and so I went back for another tour and became a district advisor, a 3-man team in a Vietnamese district, basically a village, and stayed there for about 8 months. And they were closing those districts down, those district advisory teams down. So they sent me down from the northern part of South Vietnam to the southern part, to the to the Central Highlands. And I was supposed to go into a district down there, and I was ready to go, and all of a sudden they said, no, you're going back to Pleiku, where I had been to process in, which was up in the highlands. And Mr. Van, John Paul Van, you probably have never heard of him, but the senior advisor for the Central Highlands, had heard that I spoke Vietnamese and wanted me for a job. And so at that point, I wound up in the Air Operations Office for the Corps headquarters there, basically clearing B-52 and TAC airstrikes. And that was quite out of my normal career path, but that was a job that had to be done, and so I did it, and that was the last assignment in Vietnam. I went back to the States and was assigned to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, as the Special Security Officer. And from there, I was selected for the Commander General Staff College there to be a student in the course. Did that for a while. Then went over to the University of Kansas, finished up my master's degree. And they said, you're going to Germany because you haven't been, which is good enough reason to me. So I went over to Germany and first was assigned to the 7th Corps headquarters in Stuttgart, Germany. And it was an okay job, but Corps headquarters, it was a big organization. And I said, well, I guess I'll just stick with this. And then one of my old friends from Leavenworth came up to me, and he was the S2, the intelligence officer for the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. And he said, my tour is up. How would you like to be the S2 of the 2nd ACR? And I said, I would give anything to be the S2 of the 2nd ACR. And so I went and interviewed with the commander, who was a real piece of cake. Believe me, he was a great trainer and a miserable boss. But nevertheless, his 2 years of discomfort were really terrific, and gave me a much broader feeling for what the U.S. Army was all about. It was real tactical stuff. And so I stayed there until I made lieutenant colonel. And once again, looking for a job, and they said, we'll give you a choice between Army Attaché in South Africa or Israel. And I said, South Africa, and they said, Israel. So I went to Israel and spent 3 years there, of course, during the first Gulf War, and when Saddam Hussein was lofting missiles into Israel, and it was quite a time. It really was. I also did a lot of traveling through the West Bank, Gaza, Golan Heights, all of those interesting places, and it was quite a tour. 3 years go fast when you're. U.S. had and has very strong relationships with Israel, and so every congressman, senator, and general and admiral wanted to come visit, and so we were kept pretty busy. And at the end of that, they were basically telling me I wasn't going to make general, which I could have told them already. They said, you can go back to the Pentagon and sit around until they decide to retire you, or you can retire. And I said, I'll retire. And that was it. I had a varied career, and I was always looking for something that would be interesting to do. And when I got into a place that I didn't think was interesting, I tried to talk my way into another place. Yeah, right. You can do that to some degree in the Army, but sometimes you just have to sit back and take it. Now, as an example, when they told me I was going to go up to Pleiku and do B-52 strikes, I thought, I'm not qualified to do that. But somebody had to do that. So it was high pressure stuff, because it wasn't particularly intellectually stirring, but if you did it wrong and put those bombs in the wrong place, you could kill a lot of people who were on our side. And that was something that kept me awake at nights, wondering, did I get those 6-digit coordinates right? Did I understand what the people in Khartoum, which is the place that was surrounded, we were bombing all around that place with B-52s and TAC air. and I would go back to my hooch at night, and I would read a book, waiting to hear the bombs go in, and it was very stressful. But I'm glad I didn't try to get out of that one, really. People have ambitions. I certainly didn't. I wanted to make it to colonel. I didn't have any illusions that I was on the fast track to being the U.S. Army G2. But you can push. Many successful people have pushed very hard and designed their career for the next step up, and many of them just wind up being disappointed that they didn't get that last step. And you should be doing what you want in your career if you can, and you should do what you have to do when you have to do it, right? If I could give some advice to a younger person, if you want to have a career that's both enjoyable and that you will feel proud you did, proud of the things you did, try and stay with the combat units, with the tactical units, and don't be reaching for one of those jobs in the Pentagon that's going to make you a general officer, because it's probably not going to do that.